How to see the constant body fat loss that you want and what the science actually says about it. There's a study I keep coming back to when a man tells me the metabolism is broken, it's not working, can't do that. Any of that stuff is not it. How to see consistent body fat loss for men and what the science actually says about it. There's a study I keep coming back to when a man tells me that his metabolism is, in quotations, broken. It doesn't work. The belly fat doesn't budge. Research says that the people that ran the study, the researchers themselves, overfed people by 1,000 extra calories a day for 6 weeks. This is controlled conditions, meaning that their eating was monitored, their calories were monitored, and on average, the people gained around 6 to 7 pounds. When they went back to look at why, this is because they were at calorie surplus. But one person barely gained two. Why? That person had just started moving more throughout the day without realizing. He was fidgeting, pacing, shifting around a lot more in his chair. Their body just burned off a lot more calories and non-exercise thermogenesis in the background, even though they weren't conscious about it. That one finding explains more about why fat loss stalls for busy guys than most programs will ever tell. Today, I want to go deep into real science, why your body does what it does, and what that means for you practice. Welcome back to I'm Coach Brian Parana, episode 83. Been doing this for 23 years. Actually, my third, fourth podcast I've recorded today, not only for mine, but I've been a guest as well. So, sharing lots of experience and hoping you get a lot out. Today's gonna be a long one. So buckle up, pause it, notes. Just want to be upfront with that. We're gonna run over an hour, most likely. I like to talk and try to keep them shorter, but I wanted to dive into things deeper, not just surface level. It's just like, hey, move more. Want to make sure that that loss ice actually gets spoken about and leaves men actually understanding what they need to do. They'll feel smarter. And quite frankly, anyone listening in right now deserves this. I've been in this, as I said, for 20 plus years, thousands of clients with fat loss, blood work improvement, body composition changes, and their identity. The confidence that they get when their body changes is significant. And we're going on the research because I've literally read the PubMed studies, I've watched the YouTubes, I've listened to the podcast, I've read the blog posts. So let's walk through what the actual science says about how your body works when you're trying to lose, why the numbers break down when you're trying so hard, what your metabolism is doing that nobody's telling you about, and why some of those popular in the space don't hold up when you test real science to real out. What does this mean if you're in your 40s and 50s and want to live an exponentially live full lifestyle? Let's pour coffee. I got one right here. That and my water, and off we go. You why you stop trusting nutrition advice and why that makes sense. I want to start because I think explains a lot about where we are in our society and what a lot of men are currently juggling, and the advice has been wrong. Not just incomplete, but wrong. For decades, men have been told that fat is the enemy. Let's get rid of all the fat that we can. Saturated fat, heart disease. So we cut the fat and follow the food pyramid. Whole grains, deep proteins, low fat everything. What happened when people did that? They swapped the fat for sugar. Processed carbs flooded the market space, and they were hiding under the halo, healthy foods. Why? Because they were low fat, and the marketing on the front of the labels was prevalent in that way. Marketers were keen on, hey, if I cut out the fat in this product, then I will be able to market it and sell it and make money because people are going to buy it. They do not want that foods. This didn't help metabolic disease. It kept going up anyways. And it's not a minor mistake in that you told the generation of people mm, that they need to have less fat. And it was a lot of credited credentialed people that and a lot of people that followed along, they ended up with worse blood work than their fathers had. Now, mm, I really want you to understand when you follow the rules and they're wrong, it wasn't your fault. And this is where it gets dangerous because you're just following what they are telling you. And the skepticism creates a big opening around not knowing if this is true or not. And when that happens, the loudest voices rush right into that opening and start yelling from the those are the ones that uh, listening to, or they appear to be the loudest in a sense. You got guys on YouTube that are telling you that seed oils are the root of all evil. Guys are telling you the idea that insulin is the only metabolic variable that matters. Meat only carnivore diets. Vegetables are from Satan, something like that. Fasting protocols because autophagy is supposed to unlock metabolic superpowers. Once you go the past the forbidden, the extended amount of food, the timing that you not eat, like you need to go 20 hours without food to unlock some secret metabolic hack. It doesn't work. Some of the content isn't actually all wrong, but a lot of it is built around the person that's being loud and probably monetarily is impacted by the claims. And it's not really about price. And that's the big difference. Here's what I actually believe about how real science works. Replication is everything. Publish a finding. Someone else tests it in a different lab with different people. If it holds up across multiple studies over time, you build real confidence that that hypothesis is true. If it falls apart, you update your position, and that is the method. It's called a scientific method. And I had mentors early in my career who were researchers. And they had a simple rule, and they'd say out loud, if you can keep running your experiment because you do not like the results, you are not doing science anymore. You're just creating trying to squeeze an outcome of trying to make lemon juice out of a lime. Just it's a lime. You're trying to make the data tell you a story, what you want it to do. This is a Netflix documentary paid by someone that wants the outcome themselves, and the data and the experience of someone watching gets the outcome of that end of that video. Oh, there's so many of them. There's a Game Changer. There's Eyes of Forks. There's even say the Weight Watchers, 3-part series. They're all telling a story, and someone paid to produce them to get to an outcome of it or to run an underlying theory or thought that pushes their agenda forward. The job is to change a hypothesis that fits the data, not the data fit your hypothesis. And that really stuck. Okay, yeah, this totally makes sense. Scientific method, something I've learned for out years that I've been doing this, is it is the exact opposite of how most nutrition content gets made. Most of what reaches you already has been filtered through someone else's existing belief system. They stretched it along beyond what might actually be a whole true study and what it showed, and they packaged it up in a way to confirm what the audience wants to hear. And when you hear it like that, then it becomes very believable. I heard a researcher describe it in this way once. If you torture the data long enough, it will confess to whatever you want. That is not a knock on science, it's a knock on the people that are doing science and when they want to sell. What I tell you today is that fundamentals of fat loss are more consistent than all the noise that you hear that makes it look challenging or confusing. That's what I'm gonna be doing. I'm not dismissing the complexity of metabolism in human existence, but this is a real thing. I'm saying that the stuff that actually moves the needle for a guy your age is not buried in fringe protocol. It's the basics. For 2 decades now, I've been running the basics from people, and it works. Calorie deficit, have balanced meals, understand how much you're eating, body, sleep, water, those things matter, and I've went over that ad nauseum on the podcast. Speaking of the first one, calories in, calories out is real. Here's why it still feels a little bit misunderstood or people are still calling it out and challenging it. That it is not. Let me go straight at this because it does create confusion and I have to deal with it. Someone was, oh, I just watched this Instagram reel or this YouTube talking about calories in, calories out, and oh, I can just eat whatever I want. Or how there's food that doesn't cost calories. Well, all food costs calories. There's no negative calories in a sense. I'm burning more calories, whatever you're eating. Calories in, calories out is real. If you are in a true calorie deficit over time, you will lose fat. There you go. I said it out loud yet again. That is the truth. Every controlled study that accurate actually equates calories in groups shows this, meaning group A ate this, group B ate this, and the outcome was it's not a debated concept among researchers who are honestly reading the literature and holding to science. But I understood completely why it feels just confusing for a lot of people because the principle sounds simple and then real life makes the math feel like it doesn't work. Here's a first reason why. Food labels in the United States are legally permitted to be out by 20%. I want you to actually sit there and think about that number for a second. 20%. Bar that you ate, that thing in the package bag that says 180 calories, could actually be 215 without anyone breaking any rules. The package means that says that meal that says it's 400 calories can be closer to 500, right? 10% of 400 is 40, 20% is 80. So it could be upwards of 500 calories there. Multiply that margin across the full days of eating, and the actual intake can be 2, 3, 400 more calories than you actually thought because you're just going off of label. That's where you end up scratching your head. I see this every single day with people that are, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to, I'm not losing weight. Well, let's get a little bit more detailed and specific. Dealing with this with clients is they're buying low calorie brownies from a fitness brand. The label claims it's 150 calories, 17 grams of protein per serving. Who wouldn't want a brownie that's like that and not Betty Crocker? I mean, everybody wants a Betty Crocker because they literally just taste good. But this one checks the macro box. And they were eating 3 a day and thought it was a clean, compliant treat that fits their macros. We paid $300 out of our pocket to have them independently tested at a lab. This is a test that I saw, and the real numbers came back roughly triple the label calories, almost zero protein. The fat and carbohydrates were nowhere close to what the package said, meaning they are way higher and way less protein. And so you have to be conscious of all these protein filled foods that are out on the marketplace and buying them and thinking they're a healthy treat, but they literally just wrong. And it's unfortunate because you're thinking and assuming that, hey, the nutrition label says this. I believe that wholeheartedly. And you must believe that, but that's not the case. People with type 1 diabetes have been eating these things and watching their blood sugar spikes in ways they couldn't explain. So, like, why am I experiencing this if it's got so much protein and fiber baked into it? It ignores them. And most food products are not that far off, and it depends on the company. Even if you're hanging out on YouTube recently, there's a lot of creatine issues going on. Gummies, creatine gummies. A lot of companies are selling you gummy bears without creatine in them. And they say there is, but then they're getting independently tested and there is none. None. You're paying $25 for gummy bears instead of $1.50 or something. So, Haribo, I believe, is the popular gummy bear, right? Those aren't that expensive. But most food products can fall into this. And the point is that the number on the label is an estimate with a legal margin of error into it. And when you're precise, and that's you want that deficit, then the margin is of error is actually big because you're not losing weight now. And that is before we even get to portion estimation. Most men who have ever weighed their food off by more than what they realize. A serving of peanut butter on a spoon looks like an ounce or a tablespoon. It's roughly 100 calories or so for a tablespoon. It's almost 2 to 3 sometimes, depending on how much of a scoop you put into it. Modest handful of nuts from the kitchen counter can be 100 calories. If you scoop those things out and then start putting them in your mouth, then bam, you might end up with a very high calorie snack. That's one reason I love healthy fats, and, I can't trust my client to measure out a total cup of nuts, and that's the actual 100-calorie serving. How about a generous pour of olive oil into a pan? Feels like a teaspoon or a tablespoon, which a tablespoon's 120 calories, but it could actually be 300 calories sitting in that pan. It's just human behavior. Our eyes can't, especially if you're familiar with what proper portions actually look like. Spending 2 weeks actually weighing your food, and we don't wanna become obsessed about it, but actually weighing and measuring your food is a way for you to create a long-term skill that you can then eyeball. I always ask clients, "How many times you need to measure out this food that you eat on a regular basis to realize that it very close to approximately this much weight and this calories?" Only a couple times. You're paying attention. You throw on 6 ounces of chicken, ta-da! Every time, that's about how much you eat when you have chicken, and then magic happens. You're eating the right food, and it works. So this is the process of which you learn, and you're able to create real data and real workflows for you to get true understanding of what is in the calories, not just estimating what it is on top of you're estimating what you think it is, and then the company's estimating approximate calories that are on the label, we're way off. And even think about how you might run a business. You would not manage budget using guesses or approximations or think it's this, or I guess it's that. Look at the revenue estimates and trust them without running the actual numbers and looking in the bank account. All numbers ran. Nutrition should be no different. And it's the gap that needs to be fixed. One of the challenging frustration moments that clients have is the thing that I know what you're thinking, but not actually going to speak it. And you are just running off that business idea. You run your business, you lead teams, you have managing things, you are very responsible to solve all our problems of the day, and that's just who you are. But then when your body, the thing that you can manage, it gets really frustrating for you to be able to show up the way you actually should. This is a conversation a lot of guys don't have, regardless of how much time they spend in the gym, how much time they think they're tracking appropriately, and they have to just literally be honest with themselves to get the real truth of if you're in a diet, then you need to focus on that being a core outcome of what you have. All right. The honest answer is you have been working with inaccurate inputs, both sides of the equation, and that's why your intake is actually higher than what the log or your macro show, which in your calorie burn is probably lower than the formula or the amount of calories burned per watch. So you're just not going at the right way to get actual real change. What your body is actually doing when you cut calories. Let's explain this. And this is the part that most programs never explain. It's why there are plateaus that get blindsided you, and you are just, "Oh, why in the world this happened?" Your total daily calorie burn is not a fixed number. It moves up and down. It responds to your body weight, food intake. Yes, digestion causes calories to get burned. It's thermic effect of food. How much you sleep, more rested in, more that your body can run effectively efficiently. How much stress you have, your training history, and it's constantly being adjusted. And when you cut calories, your body notice starts to move the output side down to compensate. Meaning, I was eating this many, now I eat a little bit less, and now my body actually compensates and moves less. Or your resting metabolic rate can actually drop 15% with your weight loss, right? So you're actually using and it goes. This is just biological condition to meant to keep you alive. You can't have a fast metabolism and lose weight and keep that metabolism going because your body you'll die. This is just evolution talking here. A bigger factor in is that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, all those calories you burn from the fidgeting we talked about at the beginning here, pacing on a call, standing while you think, taking active walks throughout the day, shifting in your chair. I've been shifting a little bit, not as much as I like. I've been sitting, unfortunately, a little bit more than I want with all the podcasting today. But that's just part of the thing. I am going to get on my bike, ride it later to burn some calories. Things like walking to your car, fidgeting, and just playing with your kids. For most men, this accounts for more total calories burned in a day than the actual workout session. An actual workout session can range anywhere from 200 typical calories and is certainly just subconscious. It's just stuff that you do. Your brain is going to control it without you asking about it, and it's just the process of what it is. Now here's that overfeeding study I mentioned at the beginning of our podcast. Researchers added 1,000 extra calories a day to participants for 6 weeks in controlled conditions. On average, people gained 6 pounds. One guy barely two, and that was because he moved more subconsciously his brain turned on and it increased the amount of background movement. And now that in this is runs in the other direction of what most people do. 10% drop in body weight can reduce your daily calorie burn by 4 to 500 calories when you combine the resting metabolism dropping down with the lower amount of NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or you just literally moving less. It's real. You didn't change anything, it just happens. This is why a plateau can show up if you're not paying attention and thinking through these things. Why sitting all day is a problem, workout can't solve it. It's the what are you doing the other 23 hours of the day? Big pattern of behavior I find that most guys do. They get so all in on work, which I totally understand. I'm in the middle of my work day, work, work, work. And especially in the 40s, so shoot, I need to pay bills. My garage door broke the other day, a spring just yesterday. I paid some dollars for that. It's out of nowhere. So, well, better go record a podcast and try and bring in some new clients and such. And the pattern of this challenge here. So the men I work with are doing all this. They literally they lay down, right, overnight, and then they get up and they're sitting and they drive to work. They sit for 10 to 12 hours. They drive home. They might squeeze in a workout on the way home, eat whatever is possible available in the time of the day. And then they end up ultimately sitting at home and going back to sleep. It's literally like there's a study that looked at workers across a range of activity levels, from sedentary all the way to heavy manual labor. Even think of Amazon workers who are just moving crazy, or mailmen, male women. They walk a significant amount, burning lots of calories. And they tracked how each group ate. The pattern was a shaped curve, highly active up to heavily active. People naturally compensated. They ate more when they burned more calories. It's a feedback loop that just keeps your body alive. And the sedentary group ate more than the light active group, being still all day made them eat more, not less, because there's no brainwave activity to manage hunger or satiation or expenditure in the body. Research believes this happens because movement helps your brain regulate hunger, fullness signals properly. When you're stationary for most of the day, that feedback loop starts to deteriorate. It just doesn't send the patterns back and forth. You stop getting clear signals on if you should be eating or if you're full or not. You end up just eating past the point. Plus, you're busy, you're distracted, and you end up just eating whatever you get your hands on, which is you're rushing around and stuff. This is just human behavior. It's a physiological response of how you're living your day. It's got nothing to do with willpower or motivation. 45-minute workout 3 days a week, you're not fully compensate for 10 hours of nothingness. The math doesn't math. Your need is in the gutter 23 hours of the day, and you can't spend a few hours trying to fix it. That's where some of the biggest plateaus happen. Even for men that are flagged with an A1C number or elevated triglycerides or cholesterol issues, this is one of the most accessible metabolic interventions available and are able to help men manage their blood sugar levels or get healthier when they start moving more. Even building in 10-minute movement walk break after you get done eating would be highly beneficial for you. Avoidance moment. Okay, these are things that let's ask you something here. When is the last time that you actually had blood work done? There's a percentage of clients that come to me with those. They are high A1C, their fasting glucose is north of 120, 150, 180, 225. I think the highest morning blood sugar I've seen is in 300s. Holy cow, when it's supposed to be 100. a full lipid panel, blood pressure. If you're hesitating to answer when was the last time I actually did that, you need to stop and skip something to actually see what those real numbers are, and then you have real data upon how to start monitoring, measuring. And this is important because when you get your labs done, then you have an even better understanding of what you need to do and how to approach it. 'Cause if I have this issue in my body, then I can take a direct correlated action to improve it. High blood pressure, we can go with low sodium. High blood sugar levels, we can go with lowering carbohydrate intake. Okay? High cholesterol, we can work on decreasing fatty foods. It's a real thing. Carbohydrate insulin model. Why it does not well, let's talk about this, especially for my type 1, type 2 diabetics listening in and people struggling with those fasting blood sugar levels. This is one I wanna spend, some real time on. A lot of guys show up with the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity essentially says this: "We we do not get fat because we overeat. We overeat because we are getting fat." Mechanism driving that insulin. When you eat carbohydrates, insulin goes up, right? You put carbs in your mouth, rice, breads, pastas, things of that nature, insulin goes up. And insulin drives fat into cells. Insulin is a stored hormone. Okay, will elevate your fat levels, and that's not good. Now, this also, if fat is getting stored into the fat cells, it prevents your body from accessing it as energy. Can't have be a two-way street here. It's just one way. These cells are actually starved of energy, even though you have plenty of fat stored, because your body isn't pushing or energy into the right part of your body. And this makes you hungry, which makes you eat more, which makes your insulin farther, which is this loop. So you get stuck in this loop, and then you even get insulin resistance that starts to show up. And for a while, it was a very interesting hypothesis worth testing. The problem is it has been tested thoroughly, and it doesn't hold up at the most important level. So what we're talking about here is when researchers actually equate calories and protein between low carb diet and low fat diet, fat loss goals are essentially the same. I've heard this ad nauseum is that when you have calories, most importantly, are number one. We want to have protein and fibers foods in the second. I call this the simple six. Calories one, protein and fiber two. We want to be limiting the fat because it's very calorie dense. We want to suffer carbs because carbs are always and everywhere, and we want to eliminate simple sugar. So when we're able to bring down the uh, bring bring down our carbohydrates and all, then we're able to focus on paying a lot more attention to what matters most here. This hypothesis of making sure that you are, at the very least, eating the right amount of calories, and then we can focus on a lower carbohydrate approach or lower fat approach. So again, repeating that, when researchers actually equated calories, protein between a low carb diet and a low fat diet, the fat loss outcomes are the same. This is a well constructed meta analysis. That means multiple studies across in one study. So researchers will search, say, 30 studies on this topic and analyze all of them, and then give the research findings of that. That looked this meta-analysis actually looks specifically at actual body fat loss in studies where meals were provided and participants were in a metabolic ward, so you could trust the compliance data. Compliance meaning that they actually ate what they said and it was measured and it was accurate. When you control for calories and protein, the difference between low carb and low fat for actual fat loss is negligible. A few grams per day difference is either here or there. If insulin were truly the primary driver of fat storage, you would expect to see a meaningful and consistent advantage for low carb. This is not where the data shows what it talks about. Here is where it actually gets really interesting. This is the part that I think puts final nail in this simple version of the theory is semaglutide. You notice there's Ozempic and Wegovy, and it's the GLP-1 mimic. What that means is it mimics a hormone that your body naturally produces after eating. That hormone signal your brain that it has enough food. So the GLP-1, the glucagon 1 hormone, triggers that you're full. So when you take a semaglutide, your meal secreted insulin goes up, your response to the meal is elevated on this medication. Now, if the carbohydrate insulin model is correct, what should happen? Well, insulin should trap fat in fat cells. High insulin should make you hungry. High insulin should drive weight gain. So if that insulin is higher, then it ends up causing you to actually gain weight. But people on semaglutide are losing an average of 15% of their body weight. Their appetite drops dramatically, and most effective. So these are the most effective pharmacological results on obesity medication that we've seen ever produced. Great for people who are in really dire needs of actually losing fat, but it's also we don't if you need to lose 20 pounds, please, let's not use the drug. We just not overeat, because then you don't know what happens with the complications afterwards or the challenges that coming off of it actually make sense. So these are 2 things that cannot both be true simultaneously. A drug that raises mealtime insulin cannot also produce the biggest fat loss in medical history if insulin is truly the primary driver of fat accumulation. The logic collapses completely here. Now, there's a version of this theory that keeps moving through goalposts to explain away the results like this, and that is also worth paying attention to on its own. When the theory has to keep updating its explanation every time a controversial thought comes in, that's a sign that you're dealing with something that is more of a belief system than science. Hormones are real, and insulin sensitive matters, and how your body directs energy, how it does it, and where it does it is important. And that's the simple story, and the one that is being sold loudest in a lot of the corners of the supermarket and the internet, and it does not survive when it comes to the real data. That's important to know and understand here. So, next up is the methodology problem that we need to explain a little bit deeper. And going deeper here because it matters on how you evaluate the information you're getting from any source, including myself. There are research that seems to show that low carb diets produce greater energy expenditure than high carbohydrate diets, even when calories are equated. Claim was that people on low carb were burning 200 to 300 more calories per day, sometimes more. And that claim got a lot of attention because, true, it could be a significant finding. But is that how the data was collected? Again, we go back to saying that the claim was the research showed that low carb diets produce greater energy. Meaning, say you had 100 carbs or less, and you got more energy from someone that ate 300 carbs, as an example. Well, the data, when you want to measure how many calories a person burns in day-to-day life outside of the lab, you have 2 options. You've got a metabolic chamber, which is a direct measurement, and that's, I mean, and sealed room, and you measure oxygen consumption and kind of carbon dioxide output precisely. Then you can or doubly labeled water, which is the indirect method in which you can give someone water with isotopes in it and measure those isotopes against the urine and the breed over the time to establish energy expenditure. Super important. Now, doubly labeled water is a validated against the metabolic chamber normal mix. The correlation between the two methods on a mixed diet is technically around zero point 0.8. That's the correlation. This is a solid correlation for us that works reasonably well. On low carb diets, correlation between double labeled water and metabolic chamber drops to around zero point 0.5. Reason is that on a low carb diet, your body produces more carbon dioxide through certain metabolic pathways, and that throws off the equation that double labeled water uses to estimate energy expenditure. It's artificially inflated that number. So when the study's claiming superior energy expenditure more on low carb diet, they use that doubly water instead of the metabolic chamber, which just it provides an error, and the correlation is actually lower than when it is metabolic. In the same studies, it showed no meaningful difference. Fat loss between groups, the conclusion is clear. The measurement method is built has a built-in error on low carb that made that group look like they were burning more calories than they actually were. And the outcome of the data, which thing that actually mattered, showed different. But this is where people would say, "Oh, that look, they burn more energy on low carb diets, and your keto, living la vida low carb people are going to show up and start saying stuff." This is just how the measurement works, and you have to use the right tools for the job. And when the most direct measurement available shows no difference in energy expenditure, and the body composition data confirmed no meaningful difference in fat loss, then I go through all that not to make your head spin or get you confused or anything. It's a little, I warned you, it's going to be deeper because I think that it's important to understand how research can look convincing on the surface and fall apart when you examine the methodology that is used. The headline said low carb burns more calories. That explained carefully and said actually something different. So let's go into reverse dieting now. What is actually happening? Reverse dieting is a very powerful concept and topic that its coaches heated on both sides, and some swear by it, and some say there's no mechanism for it. And it just completely. I want to give you my honest opinion of it here. The idea behind reverse dieting is that after a prolonged deficiency of calories you're eating in low amount, your metabolism can adopt downwards, round down by slowly and incrementally increasing calories. Not clear is that it can raise your metabolic rate back without gaining significant amount of fat. It's important. So say you are at 2,000 normally and you diet down to 1,500 and slowly added 1,500 for a week, 1,600 for a week, 1,700 back to 2,000. It takes you 5 or 6 weeks. The idea is that it helps you rebuild your metabolic ceiling or the amount that you need with the next cut without costing you gaining fat. And here's where I land after working with real people for a long time. I don't think that raising that reverse dieting meaningfully raises your metabolic rate in a direct physiological sense. The data on actual resting metabolic rate changes from incremental calorie increase is not particularly convincing. And here's what I actually think happens when it works for people. And it does work for some people. I've had it work. I had people eat a lot more over a long time. But when you have been in a deficit for a long time, your testosterone can be suppressed. Your thyroid hormones are just sitting on the lower end of the range. Your sleep quality definitely suffers, and your training drops. Your neat. You're fidgeting. You just literally move less when you have less calories in you. When you bring the calories up, slowly, a lot of these things start to normalize. Your training improves, you move more, you sleep better, your hormones respond better. None of that directly raises your resting metabolic rate in a dramatic way, but the downstream effect on your total daily energy expenditure through the improved training performance and need and better hormone environment can be great. And it allows you to set up better, uh, it allows you to set up an efficiency, a sustainable deficit the next time around. Practical value is real when even in the mechanism is not exactly what the original theory was, say, like slowly adding to get your metabolism up, it's important to know. So when people ask me about reverse dieting, I say this: the strict theoretical version of why it works probably does not hold up perfectly under scientific scrutiny, but the practical outcome for a lot of people who have been grinding in a deficit for months is worth something real. If it helps you reset and run a better next phase, then that's what you need to do. Meaning that if you also people overestimate what they eat and underestimate what therefore by slowly adding some back in can be a great mechanism to get them to be eating more over time, but not putting too much calories in their body to then cause them to gain body fat. Be the worst thing. Nothing like working so hard for months and months and you gain a lot of fat. Intermittent fasting, the honest version. Men ask me about this constantly. Skip breakfast, eat in a window, one meal a day. Let me give us a straight. When research actually controls calories and protein between intermittent fasting groups and regular eating groups, the false outcomes are similar over 12 weeks. That is what controlled research shows. Intermittent fasting is not a metabolic advantage. You don't get autophagy, you don't get all this magic happening. It's just a way for you to manage calorie intake so you can lose fat. It's just structure. Oh, I don't eat after dinner time at 8 p.m., then I eat after dinner. That's it. We just don't have to worry about extra calories coming in later then. So, what we have next is understanding the specific problem for men in their 40s, 50s, and 50s is that when you compress your eating into a window without paying close attention, protein almost always drops. It's really hard to eat 100 grams of protein in 2 meals in a 6 or 8-hour window. It's just a lot of protein, let alone enough vegetables and fiber as well. So when you drop protein and it's not optimal for a guy to lower protein, as we've gone over a lot, you want adequate amounts of protein in your day to day so that you are maintaining as much muscle mass as you possibly can and losing the fat, specifically fat. And the older you get, the body is less efficient at maintaining muscle, especially in the calorie deficit. So you actually need more protein as you get older. Now, there's research labs out there that when they resistance trained both groups and actually equated protein between them, meaning that they were equal, over 12 weeks, there was no meaningful difference in lean mass outcomes. Intermittent fasting can work for body composition, but those subjects were eating 3 substantially high protein meals instead of in their eating window, and that they were not doing the skip breakfast and eat whatever you want and whatever fits before 8 p.m. at night, which is what most guys end up actually doing in real life. Just like, "Well, I'm just not gonna eat between noon and 8 and have no plan on what I'm eating, and I hope my wife makes something good for me at dinner." Yeah, that's not it. Now, the more extreme fasting protocols, alternate day fasting, that means that one day you don't eat and the next day you eat normal, or one meal a day, OMAD. These show less favorable lean mass outcomes in the research, and in one controlled study, finding and comparing these day fasting to straight calorie restriction with no equated calories is not great. Okay? calorie restriction with those great calories, the alternate day fasting group lost meaningfully more lean mass over the time that they were in the study. Now, one study is not definitive, but the trend of the research shows that the more aggressive the fasting window is not favorable for muscle retention, which is goes on everything that we've always talked about is making sure you have adequate amounts of protein spread out throughout the day, and that'll help actually maintain lean muscle mass in the most favorable way. So, eat normal, low calorie deficit, lower calories than you should, and be in a deficit and spread it out more balanced throughout the day, and you'll be fine. Let's talk about depression and exercise. This is true. I want to spend some time here. And this hits with a lot of guys because they don't want to admit any of this out loud, that they might be lonely or depressed or anything like that. There's a meta analysis published fairly recently. Researchers described as strong enough to support exercise as a first line treatment of moderate depression and anxiety, meaning that less exercise first over supplement to patient as a primary intervention in the reason for the study at that level of severity. Is this is a significant statement, and I think most guys need to hear this because here's what I see in my coaching practice all the time. Men who are technically fine, they're good job, family, home, and things seem to be normal. And what they're not clinically depressed necessarily, but just have low energy, low libido, low motivation. They're just going through the motions. They don't have that say spark that they once did. At first, they think that nothing to do about it, and they can just ignore it and put their head in. But that doesn't work for long. And what I want you to think about is what's actually happening in this situation. We evolved to move. Our baseline state as human is activity, not gym activity in the modern sense, like what we have now, but physically engage with the world like all day long. Just get in and move your body. We used to hunt, build, farm, walk long distances. Nervous systems and our hormonal regulation systems and neurotransmitter systems are all developed in that context. And that's exactly what is baked into our biology, literally by our whole lifetime. When you remove that constant physical activity with daily life, running around the business, running around with kids, and having a hard time regulating your emotions, your mood, your motivations based on the external stressors that you end up getting in your day to day life. And yeah, you're going to feel worse. It's not that exercise cures depression, but it gets us back to a lot of what we normally have identified with as being part of who we are. Is that not exercising is a chronic issue if you don't move, and the challenge that we have to pay a lot of attention to, guys. So the baseline expectation for how the body is supposed to be used, and it's not being met day in and day out. You talk through that for years and years, and so that's a big challenge that you're not gonna be able to overcome anytime soon. When you add constant training back in, the results go far beyond body composition. Men tell me they sleep better. Men tell me that they work better, they manage stress better, that they have more patience at home with their kids, they are more focused because they're actually burning and they don't need to necessarily call lifting a therapy session, but it feels that way. And it matters for fat loss too because you're moving your body, you're burning calories, and you feel literally better. That's so important. Now, the personal responsibility question. Just spend a couple minutes here too, going over every serious conversation I have about why people struggle with their health long term and never gets addressed honestly. There are two extreme positions in this conversation. On one end, you have the view that it is entirely personal responsibility. You choose what you You choose whether you exercise. Nobody's forcing you to put food in your mouth. Own it and fix it, right? That's on the far left. And on the other end, on the right, the end of it, you have the viewpoint that individual choices barely matter, that it's in the environment, trauma history, socioeconomic circumstances, food access, stress load, and are those are the real drivers, responsibility on them instead of the individual. Now, here's where we want to actually land after 20 years of working with people. Both extremes are wrong in ways that make them useless. The full personal responsibility position falls apart when you have work with so many people and coaching men who generally could not moderate their eating around certain foods other the way other men could. I've seen this in the research on how early trauma affects eating behaviors and you are how food rewards us. The pathway is different for each person, and how appetite regulation and it generally works differently in people who have been chronically obese for years, and also those telling those that they just need to want it more and be work harder and is actually lazy coaching. So we have to find these circumstances and these situations in which we can monitor the environment, the history, the biology, the challenge that someone faces, and the stress that they are under for them to be focused on what it is. So, as a real coach, we have to understand it's all of those things. You have to take personal responsibility, but we have to pay attention to the actual situations that come into play. So, that's super I wanna share, one more thing with you that I believe that the main point of this conversation today, and I'm probably gonna break it up into a second one, is that episode because I still have a couple more things. I don't want this to be a huge, huge power episode. Hopefully, you've gotten a lot of impact of the talking points that we talked about today. I don't have them broken down in the show notes on the different topics of the conversation we had so that you can go through and listen to each different one. The main point being is that you are responsible for your own health and well-being, that you have to manage calorie intake, knowing that whether you fast or whether you have just eat all day or you have a higher carb or a lower fat diet when calorie protein are equated, your needs, your body's day-to-day movement, all this stuff matters to get you to the outcome that you my goal in any coaching that I ever do is helping people understand what it is, how it is, why it is in the easiest possible way. I hope that our conversation today helps shape what is the best route for you. And we'll jump in a couple more because I have a couple more pieces on this topic to talk about that I had in mind, but we're out of time. Well, that's it for episode 83 of Driven for Health. And if you need help figuring out what the right approach is for you, that's what the Call to Rise is. It's a 100-day fat loss challenge for men that want to lose weight, that want to improve their blood panels, that want to have a sustainable life, a lifestyle that they can share with their kids and they can share with their spouses and their everyone around them and live in excitement and energy and really in the best body they've been at in the last 5 to 10. Check out thecalltorise.com and fill out a form if you're interested. And we have like-minded you listening in, really you're dealing with the same challenges as they are. They're just doing something about it to change their outcome. That's it for this episode of Driven for Health. Thanks so much.